Now you're at university, but if we rewind the clock, or rather, even if you look back now at your experience of the HSC, just give us a brief description of what that looks like, especially now that you're outside of that experience. What is it like to look back at it? And have you kind of changed your perspective about anything since finishing the HSC?
I guess looking back on it, I definitely kind of realized just how much it took out of us, especially with like the year that we had, like COVID and lockdowns and online learning. Like it was just very much a stressful time. And like kind of looking back on it as well, just like kind of seeing what an achievement it was even to just like get through the HSC and like get through year 12.
Yeah, there's an incredible resilience that's required, especially when you go through something like a pandemic. I mean, I can't even relate to that, so I feel so bad for everyone in your year. But I also, in some ways, I'm kind of like happy for you in that you have gone through something that's really challenging, unquestionably, and now you've actually built that resilience to then take into the world outside of the HSC, right? So, there's pros and cons, depends how you look at the experience. But when it was quite difficult, and I imagine, especially when you were having to learn from home and you had a very kind of scattered routine and there was sport called off and you just kind of had to study in your room, what was kind of keeping you going? What was your motivation personally? Because I know this is different for everyone, but what were a few of the things for you that kept you going, and what did you do to keep yourself disciplined and keep that study routine up, if you did?
It was a lot of kind of maintaining a balance in terms of kind of doing as much like study as possible while also kind of keeping exercise and like keeping hobbies and communication with like friends and people, just kind of maintaining that balance when I was feeling like quite stressed or exhausted, like going for a walk or like taking some time off my studies, like taking days off when I needed, just to kind of keep myself in that headspace of like, it's possible, I can do this, like it's going to be okay. And I guess looking forward to like graduation and like the end of school and like I guess summer and like the holidays, like having that as a kind of motivation that kept me going through.
Yes, of course. And I was going to say on that with, graduation and things like that. So were there any other things that you kind of kept turning your mind to? Like, did you have ambitions for after school? I mean, I know you've gone straight into uni here, but were you thinking there was a particular holiday? I don't know if it was like schoolies or something. Like, were there any things that, especially as you got close to the end of the HSC, that you kept thinking about to keep you kind of going?
Definitely like kind of like an after school like trip. I went to Byron with my friends. Like I guess just having that sort of freedom like in itself was a motivation. Formal graduation, like being able to see friends outside of a school context, like just kind of having that idea, that central tenet of like freedom in a way, like freedom from that stress of the HSC, like freedom from like that academic worry. Like
Yeah, that's great. And in terms of when you were at school, what were some of like the key things that you employed, or whether they were like systems that you had in place? But we talked about motivation and thinking forward, but what about when you actually were doing your study and you were actually trying to achieve your academic goals? What kind of routines did you employ to make sure that you were going to hit those targets?
yeah, so what I did was as soon as possible, like after my classes, I would try and take notes, like read from the textbook, like cover what we did in class in terms of slides, and then get onto consolidation and content related questions just to make sure that I understood what we were talking about and like was able to apply it to different settings and different contexts. And like with that, I was kind of looking for a lot of examples, like thinking, how can I like kind of boost my responses or like bolster them in a way that like made them more convincing and like kind of created a solid argument. Doing chapter reviews, like practice responses when it kind of got closer to the HSC period, like talking with teachers, just kind of surrounding myself with just content and breaking that up and like where I needed to work on, like giving time to that. And yeah, just a lot
Yeah,
of like consolidation.
amazing. Yeah, it sounds like you really immersed yourself in that learning process, which is actually great to hear, in terms of that teacher consultation and, reviewing things, asking questions, like kind of really being in it. That's probably the most authentic way and the most effective way really to learn something properly, right? Because sometimes you can just cram things in and remember it for the exam and then be done with it. But when you're actually immersed in that process of learning something, asking questions about it, being able to teach it maybe to someone else in kind of like a peer group. I don't know if you had that, but those things all really help.